So hi everyone. I'm back with my last, panelist for the last panel discussion of the day too. And yeah, so I have with me Shruti, who is the head of Cisco Launchpad, and Ajay Ramasubramaniam, who's founder and CEO of startup Réseau. They will be discussing about corporate innovation stories from India, the lessons they've learned so far, and they'll be sharing those with you guys through a moderator who will be, setting up the context and putting out some questions for them. So hi Puneet. Puneet, over to you.
Thank you, Jagrati. Hello, everyone. Very good evening. So I have with me Shruti Kannan. Shruti leads Cisco Launchpad and works with startups. So I'd request Shruti to introduce on what you guys do in Cisco Launchpad.
Thank you, Puneet, and thank you, Jagrati, for inviting me to be part of this prestigious platform. So at Cisco, I lead the Cisco Launchpad initiative, which is a framework through which Cisco interacts with technology-based startups, and we see technology as a vehicle for delivering impact to people. So we've been working with startups of three different pillars. One is under core enterprise networking, which is core to Cisco's business. The second one is around digitization. So when I say digitization, this spans the entire spectrum, all the way from satellite technologies to mining to agriculture to healthcare. You can think of anything under the sun, literally. So we kind of cover the whole spectrum of digitization. This is essentially where Cisco kind of adds value to the startups through infrastructure, connectivity, and collaboration, while startups typically bring in their application expertise. And the third pillar that we work on is around emerging technologies, around disruptive technologies, which would ideally redefine the tomorrows for us. So the idea is to see how enterprises like ours could act as an anchor for some of these startups coming out of research labs, or even from very forthcoming startup founders. So been through this journey for the last half a decade, and very interestingly, through half a century startups that we have worked with, it's been a very interesting learning curve of working with different kinds of startups, a very steep learning curve in terms of seed to series C funded startups, or startups in that range, because a lot of them are also bootstrapped by policy. So the whole idea about engaging with the startups and helping them raise funds, which is more of a side effect of our work with the startups, that's been a very interesting journey. In fact, 90%, over 90% of the startups that we've worked with have had follow-on funding to the tune of 210 million US dollars, which is also giving us a good amount of a double confirmation from the investor community that we are indeed focusing on the right things. So, to sum it up all, I think I have been in this business of creating impact in newer geographies, in delivering value to newer use cases through technology, and in partnership with the startups. So that's what I represent, and I'm happy to share my learnings with all of you today.
Awesome. And so, second panelist, Ajay Ramasubramaniam, founder and CEO of startup Réseau. So, Ajay has been an ecosystem enabler and builder for years now, worked across different industries. So, Ajay, over to you.
What do you want me to talk about, Puneet?
Startup Réseau and the kind of work that you've been doing.
Startup Rezo and the kind of work that we do. Okay, so I've been doing this for a few years, and at Startup Rezo we have been doing it for last couple of years now. Puneet is a good friend. He has been a part of the team, and the kind of work we do is basically working with large corporates in helping them create programs which allow them to tap into the external innovation ecosystem, the startup ecosystem. And a lot of times, companies which do not really have an anchor within the startup world, but are interested, keen on working with startups, they don't really know how to formulate those strategies. We work with corporates in helping formalize those and helping them operationalize those. And it's a kind of build, operate, and transfer model where we help them create those structures, operationalize it, and hand it over back to them. But the way the Indian startup innovation or the corporate innovation ecosystem has evolved, and Puneet, we have been working together for quite some time, going back to setting up one of the first or India's first fintech accelerator with Barclays. I think it's been a very different journey in terms of seeing how corporates have evolved in their understanding of the whole corporate innovation spectrum, engaging with startups. It's not about creating a fancy office space or infrastructure, but it's more about how do you kind of create deeper engagements which kind of reflect in one way or the other, and there's value creation happening. So helping corporates in creating those programs and operationalizing it, that is what we do at Startup Réseau, and with Hindsight Ventures, which is an extension of Startup Réseau, focusing purely on Africa. The plan is the same, engaging with different stakeholders, creating different programs in this part of the world. And the reason why we are here dialing in from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania is to engage with stakeholders in this part of the world. And the genesis of East Africa Corporate Innovation Summit is pretty much on the same lines. Give the corporates a teaser to help them understand what are the kind of opportunities that exist, what are the best practices that exist out there. Folks who have been working with startups, with entrepreneurs, with innovators, showcasing that to the corporate ecosystem on this part of the world, and looking at embedding ourselves within the corporate innovation ecosystem over here, and being an operator of sorts, setting up and operationalizing programs on the ground. So, yeah.
Thank you. So I'll directly come on to the questions, and Shruti, I'll start with you. So yeah, why open innovation? As in, like, why corporates partnering with startups, and like, what have been the main drivers of this?
So I think the question why open innovation has long been answered, in the sense that people are no longer questioning this, but people are really at the receiving end of the value in this whole model of thinking. Some time back, or I'd say a couple of years or even a couple of decades back, I think we still had this question on whether, should we go for open innovation or not? Should we even be guarding our own innovation within the closed doors and all of that? I think that, and it's kind of become a myth now these days. It's kind of been busted, and especially in this era of microservices and the distributed architecture that we're all operating in. I think we are surpassing the way that we are just not calling the world as a marketplace. We are going a step beyond and saying the world is a creator ecosystem. So everybody out there is now pretty capable of now creating their own solution, their own, some form of innovation and creation, which, there is a lot of potential. There is possibility now to be able to plug it into the larger ecosystems of value creation. No, I think we've seen examples of, Tesla. They have released all of their patents in open, or many of their patents in open, a while back, for people to come on board and kind of take a look at it and start open innovating. This is probably one of the extreme cases, while on the other end we are seeing that from, I'd say, a norm standpoint, we are seeing more of corporates like ours, like Cisco and so on. So we are seeing that, I think the model that's working for us is about an API driven world, a marketplace world, where we are inviting all sorts of innovators, partners, startups to come on board, work with us, add mutual value to each other, but in the end up creating value for the communities. And which, when we say communities, we are in turn adding value for our own selves at the end of the day. So I think it's just a question of how do we add value to each other and to the communities that we live in, making the world a better place to live in. So I think that's my ultimate goal of kind of working through the startup partnership. And it's a very known fact, when you also think about corporate startup, you think of stability, agility, this kind of mental shift also comes on, back and forth. So it takes a little bit of hand holding on either side. I wouldn't just say only on the startup side. I would say even on the corporate side, it takes a little bit of hand holding to be able to work with the other party. And which is where, accelerators like Launchpad really come into place, and we are able to be the gateway between the two parties, be the router for these startups to be able to navigate the entire Cisco's ecosystem. So obviously talking networking terminologies because we are networking first companies, and it's easy for people to even relate to this, to be able to navigate to the next step, the next hop from a network terminology standpoint. So that's what we intend to do.
We call ourselves the buffer all the time. Router is a new one, so that will catch on.
Yeah, I was listening to Shameen's session, and he mentioned about interfaces. So yeah, all the accelerators are one of the interfaces. So I mean, there are multiple benefits or multiple reasons, and I would put up this to you, Ajay. You've seen it. So what has been the key driver in terms of, is it the opportunity part? Is it the technology, but talent, or maybe even the culture shift? What is happening, and how has it shaped up?
I think a few things. I think a major shift in the culture for sure. But when I talk about culture, I think it is even from an intent perspective, right? I think go back 5 years or 6 years, a lot of people doing stuff, calling it, I mean, under a broad realm of open innovation, whether someone was driving hackathons, open innovation challenges, running accelerators, whatever. I think it was more to do with the tick in the box. A lot of them were kind of doing it because everyone else is doing it, and to avoid a fear of missing out kind of feeling. Also, it was driven top down, so people didn't really have a choice, and they were given a budget and they were driving it. But lack of internal stakeholders in several ways. There wasn't buy-in, which was got at multiple levels. Which, I mean, in the journey we have all realized that it's not just about who's sponsoring it or anything else, but I think people are at the core of it. And when you talk of people, then the culture, intent, all of those kind of things kind of shape up. I think uh, when you talk of intent, I think a lot of people over time have realized that startups are not just for fun, but there are people out there, might be smaller teams doing real stuff. It doesn't anymore matter if it's a 4-person team or a 6-person team who's building something, whether they're venture funded or not. But if you go back to 2015, 2016 in India, I think one of the bigger challenges that startups were facing, when you yourself also, Puneet, as an entrepreneur, would have faced that at times, that people would do POCs or pilots, but after that, when it came to actually giving business, they would have tens of reasons why not to give it. Not venture backed, small team. What happens if things don't go the way it is planned? Whatever. But more importantly, I think it was. I can say that there was no clearly defined intent out there. But I think that has changed over a period of time. And to some of the points that even Shruti made, whether it is companies like Cisco, the Microsofts of the world, the big technology giants, I think they have also been a big enabler in the way a lot of shift has taken place in helping join GTM and go to market and other things, which probably lend themselves to startups in more ways than just the technology infrastructure or the cloud credits and whatnot. I think if you go to a meeting with say it's a hardware or IoT startup going to a meeting with Cisco, I think it definitely makes a huge difference for both the startup, and also it creates a comfort for someone on the other hand. So the reason why there has been a shift in the culture and intent, there are multiple factors which kind of come to play. But I think the other fact that is more of a, whether you call it realization, whether conviction, whatever way you want to put it out, I think corporates are better suited now to absorb or bring good emerging tech startups. If they're doing something interesting, they've managed to find ways. So that's why I call it intent, because earlier, maybe because people were not convinced, or maybe they didn't really have it wasn't. I think in one of the previous sessions, Aaron Fu spoke about KPI number 5. So having it as a KPI number 1, or the only thing that that particular department is doing is very important. So I think corporates have set up very specific departments, very specific leaders who are driving this initiative, and it's not just outside. I think the bigger sell is inside. I mean, from our experiences working with corporates and setting up programs, setting up the innovation lab is the last of the hurdles. I mean, cutting a check and having a budget and creating a fancy office space, fine. Get startups into it, that's also fine. But when the person who is driving innovation tries to position the startup within the organization, that is where I think things start to fall down, because the internal stakeholders buy-in has not been kind of brought on board. They haven't been made a part of the whole process of even creating something like this. So I think the reason why there has been a shift in the intent is because people have figured out that to create such programs. I think people from different business units, different leaders, different functions have to be brought together, and it's a collective organizational thing rather than the just the leader saying, okay, let us start an open innovation program and here's the budget, let's go and do it. It's not just about that. So I think people being at the core of it, being more involved, and collective decisioning around creating such programs, I think that is what has made corporate innovation programs in India throughout better results and create value. It's a win-win for both parties. I mean, like Shruti was mentioning, I think corporates win as much as startups win when they have good, successful programs figured out.
Yes, so I also remember as an entrepreneur. So back in 2014, 2015, people to the corporates, we would go and pitch the product. They would use, they would try, they would love the product, but they would not go and buy because you're a small team and they're used to buying from the large companies. But that has certainly changed now. So, Shruti, this was for you. So, I mean, like now in corporate programs, many that we've executed as well. It typically used to start earlier from having a corporate program, putting up a problem statement and looking for solutions, as in consumption of the technology that startups offer, to then a joint go-to-market and then even strategic investment started to happen. So, what all kind of partnerships you've seen with your programs, and any of the success stories you want to mention?
So as you touched this very imminent point of where do we start, where do we end. So it's a natural or a very common thing these days to call a cohort for engagement with the startup, which is good in a way because you get to define certain time frame of active engagement with the startups, and we do that. We in fact had our cohort of 2021 and we graduated them earlier last month. And the idea is that we are able to identify certain potential candidates to be able to partner with and for the longer journey. And that's our intent at Cisco Launchpad, to not just do cohort for the sake of it and in limited duration, but be able to identify the ones who are really adding value for the longer term, and we are able to grow with them in their life cycle journey as well. So to that effect, we kind of go through a multi-staged model, and through this we have a journey of building mutual relationship, mutual trust in this process, adding mutual value in this process. Now, while we kind of are not looking at defined problem statements as such, because we believe that for mature ecosystems like ours, it's very difficult to just go and get three problem statements defined and just work only on those. Especially being people in house, I've been at Cisco for over a decade now. In fact, I came in through a startup acquisition in the mobility space way back in 2009 and 10. We were building the mobile 2G 3G stacks then, which went on to LTE, and now we're talking about the 5Gs of the world. So having literally seen the startup scale up, the M&A journey, being part of now the bigger corporate culture, and then being part of the bigger Cisco ecosystem gives me quite a lot of intricacies of what a company like Cisco may require. And this is, I would honestly say, not possible to entirely articulate in just a couple of lines, but takes a lot of unspoken words. The learning that really comes through over a period of time is also very critical as we traverse through multiple forums, multiple product lines, business units, multiple people. I think that is also very key. It's just not problem statement or just product line and you work on that. It's also people who are really passionate about working with startups, and I think they really redefine the whole concept of working. The collaboration between corporate and startups is redefined by these people. So with all of these things taken into account, we kind of traverse with the startups over a journey of going from discovery of mutual use cases, mutual areas of collaboration, then get on to scoping the real problem, train them as it may be required. We then get into the deep dive, into their product exploration journey. So once we have the right kind of architecture ready, We then go on to do the integration, the validation exercises, which is a co-development journey with the startups. So once the certification that this combined solution is indeed working as expected, we, after the required checks, we kind of register them as our solution partner and get them on board. And this really sets the stage for a joint go to market motion, not only in India but across geographies. We have had several partners. In fact, in just the last quarter, we have had 4 startups joining on board as Cisco's partners. Maybe this is probably the right time, Puneet, to play one of our success story videos for people to have a look.
Sure. Jagrati, I might need your help here.
I think beyond us just talking, it's very important to have the stories speak for themselves. And I believe that would create the real impact.
Yeah. So you want me to play it for you, or
So
maybe
I'm
you
just
can
Yeah,
also
that
sharing
would
share
out
be
the
the
link.
screen.
Do you see
I've
my
just
screen
pasted
here?
the link on the chat window.
Yeah, wait, I'll share. Okay, who's done that?
Me.
India has a massive shortage of critical care doctors and critical care nurses. The critical care is in extremely short supply across our country.
As a result, 9 out of 10 patients in ICUs today across our country do not have access to ICU specialist doctors. And at Cloud Physician, this is the problem that we are addressing. Cloud Physician is a healthcare technology company, and we provide ICU expertise to hospitals that do not have access to ICU specialist doctors.
We use our proprietary platform, Radar, that incorporates a data analytics platform, data gathering platform, which takes in all the bedside data from the patient and integrates into a uniform solution.
Our solution has networking as a major component, and Cisco, being a world leader in networking solutions, was a natural fit as an accelerator partner for us.
The Cisco Launchpad itself has helped us define our market fit, define our client persona with a lot of clarity, and that has helped us refine our business plan entirely. The mentorship with Cisco has been very engaging, very involved, and the mentors take a lot of their personal time to guide us in the appropriate direction to best hone our skills.
So while we were working closely at Launchpad with Cisco, we began exploring Cisco solutions. And among one of the solutions that we were exposed to was the Cisco Meraki solution.
The Meraki solution is a plug and play model, and it allows us to deploy our services, which we would like to call an ICU in a box.
Whenever an ICU staff notices an issue or a critical healthcare application, the IT teams have to resolve it quickly. With Cisco Meraki, we offer a cloud-managed dashboard which can be used by IT teams to monitor and troubleshoot networks at a global scale.
They also helped us with the COVID pandemic, where they actually gave us devices and donated them for the cause.
I think apart from all the technology and all the stuff that we see, that we have because of Cloud Solution, it is the people. It is the empathy that we see in the people. It is the commitment to care.
We are a healthcare technology company, and Cisco is all about networking. What better proof of success of networking and healthcare than having this interconnected web of ICU services that are crisscrossing the nation and helping improve the quality of ICU services across the country.
One of the important things when I look at a startup is that it is about how do you get your technology that you're building to the customers, as well as how do you build a company. Cisco's Launchpad is a vehicle for both of them. We give leadership, coaching, ability.
So I think that kind of sums it up, Puneet, in terms of really tying the different kind of dots much more meaningfully to be able to address the specific requirements across geographies. Now, this specific case of EICU is not really restricted to an Indian context. I think this is probably applicable to anywhere in the world where there is a need to enhance the capacity of ICUs, where there is a need to enhance the quality of access and quality of good healthcare services. So now what we were only playing is more of an enabler role, helping the cloud physician team to be able to offer a more robust infrastructure to house their application on. So this kind of collaboration really, is what we intend to offer in all possible areas, not restricting to healthcare. We've been at it in areas like, say, aviation, shipping, maritime, agriculture, fintech. So I think it kind of ranges the entire spectrum of where we want to collaborate for meaningful impact.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. And Ajay, this one's for you. You've been looking at multiple programs. So, what are the right ways, or I would say, how do you measure from the corporate side? How do you measure innovation?
Measuring innovation. Okay, so there can only be kind of two ways. One is the innovation quotient or innovation component itself. The other is pure play numbers. So the economic uh, top line, bottom line kind of reflection that any kind of integration can have. But beyond that, I think a shift or a change in the culture. So there are a lot of organizations which are primed up for adopting these kind of strategies, engaging with startups, and so on and so forth. But if you start with organizations which have a potential to engage with startups, engage with innovation that is happening outside, but they really don't know how to go about it, I think there can always be a baseline sort of things that can be established, which does not have to be setting up an accelerator and running cohort, but more importantly, creating forums or creating engagements which allows them to talk to startups on an ongoing basis, by virtue of which, within more than translating something into a successful collaboration outside, if the internal culture of people from an innovation standpoint changes, I think that's also a big marker. The second one is purely from, I mean, we have seen this several times running hackathons and innovation challenges. It's more of a
Ajay, did we lose you? Because I seem to
Ajay,
be,
I can't hear you.
we are able to see your video, but your audio suddenly went off.
Still, you want to unplug your earphones? So meanwhile, I'll yes, let's hear how do you measure innovation at Cisco?
So as I have been, kind of stating from the beginning, the first and foremost thing that I see about innovation or kind of measuring innovation is about the impact that we are able to create. How many, different geographies, how many different communities we're able to create an impact on. And this is not only on the end consumers perspective, this is also from a creator perspective. Like today, we are working with startups across 6 continents. And what does this mean? Working with startups across 6 continents is actually helping accelerate the culture of creation across these countries. And this has, kind of a butterfly effect in, their peer circles as well. We are busting the glass ceilings across, all of these networks and circles, that there is, we are enhancing the barriers for the huge aspirations that people are building, making them from plausible to possible. So this shift, becoming the bridge, is what we kind of really measure about. One is the impact on different geographies, the impact on different communities and different use cases that we are able to deliver impact. And of course, the very tangible outcomes are how many of them are we able to onboard as Cisco's partners, because that really helps them to drive the joint go to market motion along with us, increasing their revenue and their team sizes, and contributes to the different nations' GDP as well. So I think it's kind of an end to end when you look at it very directly. Indirectly, there is a lot more of effects, which is with respect to mentorship, for instance. These are more of intangible side effects when it comes to learning that percolates on either side. I think we have an interesting question from Edwin on how do you see value leaking from collaborations with outsiders. So now one part of this seeing the same thing is that you tend to percolate some learning across borders. The boundaries are blurred in this whole context of open innovation. But the other aspect about this leakage and how do you handle it has to be done very consciously. You need to be very cognizant. More so, from a startup perspective, you're scared that you'd lose your IP. And from the corporate perspective, they are very, very cognizant of their reputation in the market, and they want to keep up their image as a leading player. So I think both parties are equally cognizant about this fact. So this is threaded on a case to case basis, very consciously, and there are NDAs drawn up, there are agreements drawn up on how this exchange happens. In fact, there are programs across different corporates even to kind of see how such joint patents can be generated as well. So I would say that kind of patenting could potentially also be one of the KPIs for several such programs to kind of consider.
So we've Ajay back, and we wanted to hear innovation stories from India. So we
Am I audible now?
got yes, yes. Now you
Am
are.
I okay? Cool. No, so what I'm saying
Yeah.
is, I guess there are only two broader buckets under which we can categorize this. One is the state of economic indicator, and the second one is the innovation index or the innovation aspect of it. But I think within that, if you look at it, again, organizations are at different points when it comes to their innovation life cycle. There are many of them who are mature and for whom the KPIs would be measured in terms of the technologies and the IPs and the other thing, the adoption, the way it is kind of reflecting in their top line, bottom line. But if you look at organizations which are doing it for the first time, I think there are a lot of other indicators as well, which are probably bringing about a shift in the internal innovation culture where people are contributing more. So instead of doing a hackathon outside an organization, if you do it with internal teams, chances are that you'll find someone contributing ideas and whatnot. And if you even make those small changes, right? Just the other day here, we were meeting up with a bank, and they were talking about the queuing system, which kind of they adopted or where they made the change purely from some internal suggestions that came in, and it was they implemented QR codes and whatnot, and that kind of impacted the way the traffic was managed at their ATMs, at their branches, and so on. I mean, apart from just innovation going to the customer, I think when you drive these kind of initiatives with internal people, I think there are a lot of people who have ideas. There are a lot of people who are shy, or they're not very open about sharing it with internal teams or their bosses or whatever. But creating such forums, it only allows, and these are the same people who are going to leave the organization and go and probably build a startup. So by creating a forum or a platform for them to engage, I think it's a win-win for both employees as well as the employer. Apart from that, also very low-hanging things like whether from purely from a marketing or an eyeballs perspective, talking about yourself as a new age or a digital first organization by creating engagements, whether it is with colleges, universities, youth, and whatnot. I think that also kind of helps from a branding perspective or a brand perspective for an organization to be seen as innovation first. But then when you kind of go up the ladder, up the pyramid, I think then it has purely got to be in terms of what kind of impact it is able to bring in, and that can only be measured in very quantifiable kind of numbers. Also, for very mature organizations which are probably looking at innovation from or startups from an acquisition perspective or an investment perspective, I think how further ahead or how far ahead can you think of and invest in companies of the future, companies that do not probably even relate to the kind of work that you're known for or what you do today, and how that pans out over a period of time. I think those are for much more mature global multinationals which are creating those CVCs or corporate venture capital. Cisco has a big one as well. CVCs which are purely used for acquisitions and an enterprise wearing the hat of an investor and making investments. So I think the spectrum is fairly broad, and almost every organization would fit in somewhere or the other if they were to look at ways to measure themselves. And the KPIs can be, yes, it can be financial for sure, but also there are several non-financial ways of monitoring or evaluating the innovation agenda and the innovation programs that organizations run.
Thank you. We're out of time, but I would want to hear very quick. I would want to hear any of the stories. Like Ajay, you've worked across so many industries, so many startups. Any of the partnership success stories you want to mention?
Okay, so I'll talk about the very first one that I was a part of, and which you also were a part of with Barclays. It was India's first fintech accelerator. And I think more than Barclays giving business to any of the fintechs that were a part of it, I think one thing that struck me a lot from couple of startups was that as a startup, as a fintech, and I'm bringing up this context because very recently that we're sitting here now in Tanzania, a bank has launched its sandbox. I think it's the first bank in this country to launch an open banking sandbox, and I think it will do a lot in terms of how fintech shapes up over the next few years. So for me, I think the Barclays story is a good one because for a lot of fintechs which were up and coming at that time, the biggest challenge was to prove themselves out or to validate their product, access to data. And that is the, I mean, you can write whatever algorithms or whatever you want to write, but if you're not able to apply it, I mean, you're never going to be able to figure out whether the product even really works. So for me, I think a couple of startups, when they spoke about my entire journey of product development, probably has been cut short from 12 to 15 months to 4 months, just because, and one of the point again that Shruti made, access to mentors, people who are bankers, people who are in those roles, either as underwriters or as treasury guys, people who run investment banking, people providing inputs on the basis of their expertise, which is 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. That is one. The second one is to access to real data, even if it is masked data, just access to certain kind of data which is available, on top of which they can probably deploy their products, they can figure out whether the product works or not. I think those two aspects for me kind of stood out for from the Barclays program, and I think because it was the first fintech program, it kind of created a pathway for several more banks and financial service institutions in the country to set up different kinds of fintech programs. And so for me, that program, it kind of still stands out.
So I want to add, so one of the stories from Barclays itself, because interesting thing was, so as a startup founder, someone who's been from let's say a banking background and has solved a problem for banking. And in Barclays, we saw when the same startup with the same product meets teams from different domains. I mean, when the wealth team came in and they saw a use case there, so a startup founder discovered even a bigger market and a bigger opportunity on the other side, which he wasn't seeing earlier. So yeah, anything you want to add, Shruti? And we'll see if we have any questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think this is about the intersection of different kinds of opportunities and technologies as we are in this post-pandemic era and in this age of digital transformation. Similarly, in this, if I look at fintech now, um, we have one of our portfolio startups called Satsure. So now what they are doing is taking in satellite technologies, applying it with the information available from the farms on the ground, that's coming in from the soil, and using a combination of this data to empower the credit providers, the financial institutions, so that they are able to provide quality credit access to the farmers. Now, just think about this: four totally disparate elements coming together, and who is to benefit at the end of the day? We are to benefit, literally, right? Farmers giving a bumper harvest. I think it's just a blessing for all of us. So if we are able to facilitate, playing an ecosystem enabler role is totally a fulfilling role, as part of this entire thing. We in fact have done joint white papers with them of this implementation in Kerala and Telangana as well, in India, where such impactful intersection of multiple technologies, multiple ecosystem partners coming together to solve for the real problems of the world, which I think will definitely resonate with a lot of the East African counterparts as well, is what I think we're looking at. And hopefully, in the years to come, we'll have more opportunities for collaboration from the East African fraternity as well.
Awesome. Love this SAT shirt. So they're giving loans from the space.
Oh, yes, cloudified loans.
Yeah. All right. So we'll open it up if the audience has any questions. So one question you've already answered here from Edwin.
So, any questions? If attendees have, you can post it on the chat, or maybe just raise your hand if you want to be on screen. There's one comment saying that the world as a creative ecosystem. Love it. Right.
Yeah, everyone's a creator now.
Let's hear from someone in the attendees wants to share something around this topic and want to, speak. Raise your hand. I'll get you on screen. As this is the last discussion that we're having for the summit, and maybe you can add. There's no one who's interested.
Maybe I would have a question for the audience if we have some interested parties. Is if Cisco were to come and work with the startup fraternity in Africa, so could the audience give me pointers on why should Cisco be coming, and what points, what value can we add to the startup community in Africa? Ajay and Puneet, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts, but if we have some passionate startup founders in the audience, I would love to hear their comments on this as well.
Anyone who wants to take this question up and answer it, be on screen.
Startup founders, routers.
Yeah, I am in Kenya and would not mind a partnership.
So, Celine, tell us, why would you want to partner with us? Why not with somebody else? What value do you think we can uniquely bring to you as part of this partnership?
Celine, raise hand. Come on screen.
If I can just chime in on that. So, Shruti, to your point, I mean, having been in this market for some time now, interacting with founders across different industries. If you look at supply chain, if you look at ag tech, there's a fair bit of opportunity for sure. I'm sure Cisco does have engagements and partnerships with different innovation hubs and incubators, accelerators in this market. At least I'm sure there would be something. But yeah, the opportunity definitely is there. The market is still a few years, I would say. So if I were to just draw a straight off comparison and the thesis that we use and that we have seen others use in this market, the only difference between India and Africa is that India is a country, Africa is a continent. That's about it. But if you look at the size of the population, the internet penetration, the youth, a lot of it in terms of pure play demographic numbers, they're pretty much similar. Also, I can just stick my neck out and say this, that if you were to look at the trajectory, China, India, and Africa, I think where India was in 2014, 2015 in terms of the kind of startups, probably Africa is there today. But if you look at the quality of startups and the kind of products being built, uh, I feel, and it's my personal opinion, I'm not sure how many of them would think of this, but the quality of startups here, India circa 2014, is very high. The quality of entrepreneurship here, the kind of products being built. Of course, I mean, you're talking 2014 and 2021, but that is purely in terms of where the ecosystem is, or the numbers and other things in terms of investments and whatnot. But 7 years, yes, I mean, there's a lot of technological changes, and there's a lot more knowledge which is out there, the benefit of hindsight which is there, but still quality of entrepreneurship here is fairly strong. So yeah.
Very, very insightful. Thank you for sharing, Ajay.
So we do have comments coming in. Karthike, if you want to come on screen and share. One of the biggest advantages of coming to Africa is the rate of tech adoption. Okay, he's here. I'll just hand him the mic.
Hi, sorry. Hi, you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Very well, Karthike.
Okay, great. So I think this just the point I wanted to add. Like, I myself have been here for I think about 1.5 years now in Nigeria, and what I've seen here is like, or what I've seen regarding more Africa in general, is the fact that tech adoption, like I was saying, it's leapfrogged the whole generation, like Puneet has stated. Like, and because of that, I think what I see, like with mobile, with the ability to network with smartphones, is far more than it is possible to do with the laptops and tablets, because it encourages networking from anywhere. It's not a work from home attitude now. It's a work from anywhere attitude that I see going towards. Whether you're sitting in a cafe, whether you're sitting down the street, whether you're sitting just below your apartment, with a smartphone you can do like anything. So and in a country, like in a continent like Africa, the way we have moved, the way people have moved from having no experience at all with technology to now having mobile payments, having fintech companies rising from left and right. So that has been powered because of the direct leapfrogging from no tech to smartphones, and that I think has given Africa that huge advantage that maybe most other countries, or like most other Western countries, I would say, have not seen that, because they've had to go through that long period of adoption. But in Asia and Africa, that has not been the case, and that very reason is because the way they've had to catch up with the rest of the world, it's leapfrogged the way the adoption has happened in those continents, and that has given them a major advantage in way and how solutions have been coming up in Asia and Africa. So I think that that is a very, very good reason to consider Africa as a one of the top choices, for any kind of investment, because people have the talent here. The talent is here in abundance. The talent here is just the accessibility that is really needed, because the talent here is in abundance. People build apps, people build platforms like it's nobody's business here. So it's what accessibility is what will really bring Africa to that level where we hope to see it, down the road. So that's what I want to add.
Thank you, Karthike, for really articulating it right out of your heart.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here, for even if it was a couple of minutes. Yeah. So I guess if there's anybody else who would like to talk about it, that'll be a great as well.
Okay, so I think we are also on time. I mean, okay, there's one question, last question we can take. How can one create the necessary partnerships with a company in a Mumbai? I've tried, but nothing forthcoming. Are there opportunities or platforms?
Jagadi, you want to put your email ID there?
Yeah, you can connect. But Ajay, you want to take this?
Just trying to read how can one create necessary partnership. I mean, it depends what kind of partnership you're looking at. Building products in another country, or what is it? So if you can articulate a bit more in terms of what you're trying to do, I think the entire world has learned to go virtual and operate without boundaries, without borders for past couple of years. So I don't think it's difficult to formulate partnerships. Yes, I mean you need to kind of strike a balance with several things, but yeah, it depends on what kind of partner you're procuring something, you're placing an order for something, you're jointly co-developing something. Jagrati has been kind enough to put her email there, so if you can drop us a
Yeah.
note with more details, that would be helpful.
Okay. Okay, I think we are good then. We'll have to move on to the last segment of the whole conference. That is the launch of the report. So yeah, stay tuned. I'll be back and we'll take it forward from there. So thank you so much, Shruti, Puneet, Ajay, for joining and having this kind of interesting discussion. And yeah, looking forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jagrati,
Bye.
Ajay, and Puneet.
Thank you, Shruti. Have a great evening. Bye bye.